Hi, this is chapter 25, video part 2. So let's do a recap of this slide and then we'll move on. So there's a few things that you need to know for this slide. 3.5 billion years ago, first prokaryote. So it's DNA, no membrane around. 2.1 billion years ago, first eukaryote. So single cell with a membrane around the DNA. 1.2 billion years ago, first multicellular eukaryote. So eukaryote cell now has multiple multiple membranes, multiple organs, if you want to, within the cell itself. 500 million years ago, that's when the fungi, plants, and animals start migrating towards the land. And human only exists about 200,000 years ago. Okay, right here. And another thing that's important, it's oxygen level was starting to accumulate about 2.7 billion years ago. This is important because after that, that's when all the animal can start having able to develop lungs that can breathe through oxygen and start creating different energy sources like ATP, which we will be talking about in later chapters. So, endosymbiont theory, basically it's talking about how before that they actually thought mitochondria and plastids are two very weird parts of the cell, one for plants, the other one for animal cells, that that is very interesting, that's different than other parts. So what happened is they all have their own singular but circular DNA. Okay, they have their own DNA, so they can make themselves basically, and they have their own ribosomes to make their own proteins. Okay, and they have enzyme that is very similar to the living prokaryote that we have found in the environment. And another thing, it's they also have two membranes. Okay, normally most of the components within the cell only has one membrane. Okay, but for mitochondria, this one, and this one, sorry, mouse didn't work. Mitochondria and plastids, they both have two membranes. So if you can see outside membrane and the inside membrane right here, outside membrane and the inside membrane inside. So what we think it's back then they kind of these like small prokaryotes kind of been absorbed or sucked in by other cells, and then from then on they kind of just been living, and they've been recreated with every single cell replication. So that's what this theory is about. Okay, another thing that it was important in the timeline is how continental drift has changed its shape from the earliest time to present time. So you can see back then most of the continents were kind of connected together. Okay, and then it slowly started drifting apart, and then now about 65.5 million years ago, you kind of have almost a present day layout of the different continent, and then now you have present day. So basically, these this drifting from a supercontinent into different kind of continent, what we have present day, helps us to kind of understand, oh, this is how animal travels, and this is how animals spread around the world. Okay, so these move of continental plates basically changes the climate of Earth greatly. So for example, if when everything kind of gathers around from the last slide, you can see right here, when everything kind of gathers around, everything in the middle will probably have very similar organism. However, once it starts drifting and it becomes far apart, then the center is no longer the same thing. So a lot of part from South America that's supposed to be in the center long times ago, long time ago, no longer in the same location. And you can see one of the more prominent examples. North America used to be kind of like right here, right in the right in the middle of the Earth. But now it's kind of moving towards the north side of the Earth, and then this is how climate change also helps either to extinct the species or to cause speciation from happening. So, one key concept that we need to know about chapter 25 it's mass extinctions always will lead to diversity of life. So you can almost think of it how Darwin says survival of the fittest. Okay, this is kind of like that. After a huge crazy event happened, mass extinction, what happened is whatever that's left has the ability to survive, and once they adapt into different environment, you have this what we call the adaptive radiation. So what happened is the surviving animal, plants, or whatever organism it is, now they have the ability to survive this crazy extinction, but they also have the ability to adapt into the new environment. Now it's vacant from any other organism, so they can thrive in those locations. So this is kind of like how the diversity of life occur, because now they're in new location. They have the all skills plus the new ability to survive in the new environment, which they're way more well equipped. And because there's a lot of vacancy, because almost all the animals or organisms were dead from the last extinction, now they have all these resources to kind of like spread out. However, this takes a long time for them to kind of rejuvenate the population of the entire organism throughout the Earth. So, some of the major events that you need to know. I'm not gonna go through everything because, as you can see this slide very well. But some of the things that you need to know from different eras, from different eras, for example, Precambrian era, you need to know that photosynthesis basically happens in this era. So this is when you have the atmosphere start to fill with oxygens, which allows later on the animal to survive. Paleozoic, so this era is very, very important because Cambrian explosion, it's a symbolic of when most of the animal that we can find today, their ancestor basically were in a way created during this era. So this is kind of one thing that you need to know. Another thing you need to know about this era is plants and animal. This is when they start invading the land. This is when they start migrating towards the land. And then for this one, Mesozoic era. Basically, this is when the dinosaurs and the crazy big plants were around. So this is kind of like, you can almost think of this as like, Jurassic Park theme time. And then now the last one, Cenozoic. I can never say this right. This is the era when primates come around. So basically our ancestor according to biologists. Okay. One thing that you need to know on the bottom of this slide, every single era ends with major extinction. Okay. And then start with adaptive radiation. What this means is every single era right here basically transition between this era to this era, whole bunch of animal organism die. And then you have adaptive radiation. They have the fittest stay, and then now they have new skills. They can adapt it into a new environment. So they thrive and they create more. And then now again they die, and then it creates more, and then die and creates more. So basically, in another way, that we are kind of the king of the world, if you will, because we kind of survive through these extinction. Because primate would not have survived if they just got killed in one of the major extinction, and therefore human would not survive, or human would not exist today. Okay, another thing, after they have kind of this history blueprint, a branch of biology called EVO-DEVO, it's abbreviation for evolutionary plus developmental biology. I love this part, but we will talk about more in depth later. Basically, what they say is evolution of new forms of some kind of animal organism results from changes in DNA or different kind of regulation of the developmental genes. So for example, you can see because the regulation right here, this one has a regulation, this one does not have regulation, you can cause completely two different type of on the same kind of fish. Sickleback. Okay. So right here, this is marine, this is lake. And because their environment, the evolution has allow the genes, well, throughout different generation, allow the gene, or not necessarily allow, but kind of not probe, kind of help the environment to shape certain gene to be turned on at a certain time, so you kind of form this different shape. Another thing that we need to know for this chapter is heterochronic. So what happened is evolutionary changes in the rate of developmental events. So depending on how the evolution pressure environment either help us or shape us, we as a human and we as an animal kind of develop according to how environment shape us. So this is kind of like part of the evolution, and then you can see there is some resemblance. So from fetus, if this is the 1-to-1 ratio, then this is how our adult have similar kind of retain this like the younger self structure, and human we retain a really large part. So this skull is not as distorted as a chimpanzee adult. So homeotic genes, they're very, very important for development. I would love to talk about this more, but not in this chapter. So one of the examples is Hox gene. So basically, the Hox gene kind of controls how limbs come about, and for animals like us, for vertebrate animals. So if you can see the Hox gene expression with this animal versus this animals are completely different. Okay, one express very little, the other one express very much. And so whenever Hox gene, let me just take home message. Okay, Hox gene prevent the limbs from growing in animals. Okay, but Hox gene, specific type of Hox gene, also helps on the limbs to grow. Okay, so it's kind of like activation of Hox gene or prevention of Hox gene from expressing itself. So from this, it takes 400 million years for Drosophila, basically fruit fly, to have 3 pairs of legs into, oh my gosh, how many pairs of legs right here? Okay, so it's all depending on the Hox gene expression, how they're used, how they're activated throughout the entire insect's body or entire animal bodies. You have variation of limb structures. So this is really fascinating. I want to go into more, but just for the sake of chapter 25, this is something that you need to know. Homeotic genes. Okay, so it's like a master key. Think about it as a master key. Which door to open, which door to close. Last thing, oh, I cannot say this one. Exaptation. So basically, what happened is through the evolution, animal organism develops some kind of structure. However, this structure, kind of like, it's like one, what's it called? One stone kills two birds. 2 birds in 1 stone. Here we go. So it's like one feature, but it has 2 functions. So for example, bird's feather, they're used for thermal regulation, so you don't lose so much heat, either in the water or on the land. But they also have the ability to fly. So that's kind of like another 2 birds in 1 stone function. One regulation, one feature, but it has 2 functions. Okay, and that's it for chapter 25. Thank you for watching.